Is actually going to be a breakdown video of U.S. Attorney General John Ashcroft and Transportation Secretary Norman Mineta addressing the media at a White House press briefing during the immediate aftermath of the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks.
Thank you. Today, America has experienced one of the greatest tragedies ever witnessed on our soil. These heinous acts of violence are an assault on the security of our nation. They are an assault on the security and the freedom of every American citizen. We will not tolerate such acts. We will expend every effort and devote all the necessary resources to bring the people responsible for these acts, these crimes.
If only they used all the available resources that they had in place regarding intelligence, they would have stopped 9/11. But because you have certain agencies like the CIA and the NSA who refuse to share information with local enforcement agencies, which is the FBI, the Department of Justice, and 9/11 was allowed to happen. Now, of course, like I always say, I'm not saying that CIA and NSA knew about 9/11 and wanted it to happen. I'm on the firm belief that they didn't know, but they were close. Had they acted on the information regarding, say, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi living inside the United States, had they shared the information with the Department of Justice about Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi in commission with the alleged mastermind of the USS Cole attack, which is a federal crime involving the Department of Justice, they would have arrested al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi as soon as they got off the plane on January 15, 2000.
To justice. Now is the time for us to come together as a nation to offer our support, our prayers for victims and for their families, for the rescue workers, for law enforcement officials, for every one of us that has been changed forever by this horrible tragedy. The following is a summary of the known facts surrounding today's incidents. American Airlines Flight 11 departed Boston for Los Angeles, hijacked by suspects armed with knives. This plane crashed into the World Trade Center.
Notice what he said there. Let's go back.
Departed Boston for Los Angeles, hijacked by suspects armed with knives.
Knives. No mention of box cutters here. So that the 9/11 Truth Movement conspiracy is that, this is the first mention of we heard about box cutters along Flight 77. There you have it, knives. Now, the real conspiracy, like those idiots in the Truth Movement failed to comprehend, is the real conspiracy is that there were weapons planted on these planes. Now, that's not a conspiracy, it's actual fact, because when they looked at the debris field, say in Pennsylvania, they found long knives. In the days after 9/11, CNN would report that days later, when the airports opened up, that they found box cutters, knives, even a bomb on these planes. The box cutters were taped to the back of the food trays. Was there additional wave attacks? Well, the Joint House Inquiry, co-chaired by Bob Graham, seems to think yes. Zacchaeus Moussaoui, the alleged 20th hijacker, was selected to be part of the initial wave of attacks, but then was selected to be a second wave of attacks, and he wasn't even tortured. So there you have it. There's actual conspiracy in 9/11. It's just not the cuckoo theories that are proposed to you by people like Richard Gage or Judy Wood.
This plane crashed into the World Trade Center. United Airlines Flight 175 departed Boston for Los Angeles, was hijacked and crashed into the World Trade Center. American Airlines Flight 77 departed Washington Dulles for Los Angeles, was hijacked and crashed into the Pentagon. United Airlines Flight 93 departed Newark for San Francisco, was hijacked and crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania.
Now, also, to go back to American Airlines Flight 11, There was an initial report by United Airlines, I mean, American Airlines, which was drafted, wasn't an official report, but it was drafted that one of the hijackers had a gun and shot a passenger in the front seat, which we all know that the first passenger or the first person killed on island was Daniel Lewin. Was he shot? It wouldn't surprise me. Now, everybody that follows my channel knows who DJ Thermal Detonator is, and this is one of the reasons why I follow him, is because he was one of the very first people, along with Paul Thompson, to ever talk about the additional weapons found on planes and additional hijackers trying to plant weapons. And that I'm talking about on the incident on September 10th with Eric Gill. Eric Gill was a security guard for, I think, Argenbright. And not Argenbright. Was it Argenbright? I hope I'm right. Well, anyway, he was he was doing security and basically saw six men heading toward his way. Three of them were dressed as employees, and three were dressed as civilians. And they got into an argument, so yelling and whatnot. After the shift was over, there was nobody else to guard the tarmac door. The tarmac is where planes are being prepped for the next flight. But days after 9/11, he's in the store and he sees a magazine and he sees all the pictures of the hijackers and says, "Oh my God, there were two of them that tried to get on a plane on September 10th." And they were Nawaf Hazmi and not the other guy. Nawaf Hazmi, though, hijacked Flight 77. What's he doing in Boston Logan, right? I don't know. And, a lot of people say, what was Muhammad Atta doing in Portland with Abdulaziz Al-Omari? What were they doing in Portland? Well, me and DJ didn't like to theorize that they were meeting either other hijackers or more additional people that were involved with the second wave of attacks who were being protected. Why? I don't know. Because they got to sell the notion that Al-Qaeda was responsible for 9/11. I mean, I guess maybe, I don't know. It's tough to say because we really don't know. So, I mean, one of the very few people to ever bring this up, like I said, is Paul Thompson and DJ the Detonator. And that really attracted me because I go back to that draft report by the American Airlines about the gun being used to kill Daniel Lewin. And you wonder, that's not the only report. There was a report of a gun on Flight 77. So there was all these different weapons on these planes. It's almost like, it's being prepped. Well, that would mean that there was foreknowledge. And, who had foreknowledge? Who helped these people?
Crime scenes have been established by the federal authorities in New York, in Washington, D.C. area, in Pittsburgh, in Boston, and in Newark. The full resources of the Department of Justice, including the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Immigration and Naturalization Service, the U.S. Attorney's offices, the U.S. Marshals Service, the Bureau of Prisons, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and the Office of Justice Programs are being deployed to investigate these crimes and to assist survivors and victim families.
From here, by the way, from here, the FBI conducted the largest investigation in their history, which was called Pentagon, which stood for Pentagon Twin Towers bombing, right? The planes were used as bombs, which is what the whole point was. So the FBI spent, millions of dollars, for years involving this investigation, but it was being superseded by who? The Bush White House. To not investigate who? Saudi Arabia. Now, I'm not going to get into it with Israel, right? Because that's a whole separate issue. Um, there really was no investigation into Israeli activities inside the United States besides what we got from an independent report by a retired lawyer in San Obispo, California, named Gerald Shea. And of course, I'm referring to the Shea memo. So, in regards to investigations, they were immediately limited. The same thing for the congressional investigations; they were limited too. This is not to say that Thomas Keane or Carl Levin or Lee Hamilton and so many others in the Joint Inquiry and 9/11 Commission were in on it. I don't think they were in on anything at all, but I do think that their investigations and their report were limited. In fact, they had, a whole, a part of a draft about what to write in 9/11 Commission because they had a Bush lackey as its executive director in Philip Zelikow, personal friends with Condoleezza Rice, Bush's national security advisor. So, you know, I hear the truth movement always say, well, we need a new investigation. Meanwhile, they don't care about, say, getting FOIAs written to release files and documents because they think every single document and file is part of this conspiracy involving the government, as if like everything is part of the federal government and it doesn't have its own uh, its own bane of existence and mindset and agendas. Not everybody's on the same page here. Yeah, the overall goal is to protect themselves, but not everybody's going to be controlled, so to speak, totally controlled. It doesn't work like that. I wish the world was as simple as you make it out to be.
FBI agents in all of the field offices across the country and in the international legat offices, assisted by personnel from other Department of Justice agencies, are cooperating in this investigation. The FBI has established a website where people can report any information about these crimes. That address is www.ifccfbi.gov. That address again, www.ifccfbi.gov. Individuals can report any information they know about these crimes to that website. It takes courage for individuals to come forward in situations like this, and I urge anyone with information that may be useful and helpful to authorities to use this opportunity.
Now, just imagine all the tips that came in that were, favorable for the Department of Justice in investigating, people from, say, Saudi Arabia, or the angle that these were Arabs involved and the money was coming from, so and so. Yes, you have to really wonder at how many leads and tips were ignored because of the pressure from the Bush White House to protect their assets. I don't know. It could have been very minuscule. It could have been a lot. Who knows? But I know for years that they used this tip line to basically obtain information. And it went on for like 8 years. It was a long time. And then, of course, Pentagon ended, and then the follow-up to it from FBI agents that were involved with the Pentagon case that were dissatisfied with the decision made by Director Robert Mueller to not investigate Saudi Arabia. So these people that were involved with Operation Encore were agents that wanted to dig into the leads involving Saudi Arabian government complicity in the attacks. And boy, was there a fucking treasure trove of information. And of course, I'm doing an entire playlist just based on the readings of certain pages within Operation Encore. And it is just a revelation of sort of giant magnitude.
The Office of Victims of Crime has established a toll-free 800 number for family and friends of victims. They can call 800-331-0075 to leave contact information for a future time when more information is available, to find out information about a victim, or to find out information about the rights of victims and the services available to victim survivors and victim families. The determination of these terrorists will not deter the determination of the American people. We are survivors, and freedom is a survivor.
Well, let's talk about that for a short second. The terrorists basically won in this regard, with, of course, help from the intelligence services and federal government in the aftermath of it. Intelligence services really just almost gave a free pass without them even realizing it, to attack the United States with their egotistical agenda against each other. A battle of mindsets, if you will, and the simple-minded one, which is the primitive, ultra-orthodox thinking of killing yourself to preserve the holy name of God. And then you got these brilliant minds over there in Langley and in Washington D.C., and they basically got outsmarted to an extent. Like I said, with help. To make sure these attacks were successful. But the American people are defeated. Now, look, I lived in New York. I lived in New York when the attacks happened, and I can tell you straightforward that the demeanor of New York changed forever. The attacks were so egregious, so magnificent, and so demoralizing. And I think what did it was the collapse of the World Trade Center. You know, when I interviewed David Chandler, physics teacher in Colorado, about the World Trade Center and how it collapsed, he told me off record that, he goes, think of it this way, the towers had to collapse. And I said, why? Why did they really need to collapse? He goes, think of it this way. Had the towers not been outfitted with bombs or whatever, had the planes had not been enough to bring down the towers, and the towers stood, what does that symbolize to the American people? Well, it symbolizes this. We took your best shot, and now it's our turn. Bringing back the strength, the momentum, the character build, the character of New York, which is, strength and strength and stability. It's almost like people think we're just arrogant. We're not. We're fast paced. We're high strung, and that gets taken as arrogance. We're not. But when the towers collapsed, seeing two of the largest buildings in the world, the face of New York, outside the Empire State Building, these magnificent buildings crumbled right down to the ground, clean, strewing debris for blocks. And I think at some pile levels were like 12 stories high, 12 stories high, twisted metal and broken concrete. And remember, I watched the second tower, the first tower collapse. I didn't see the second tower. I saw the first. No, we saw both. That's right. I didn't see both of the plane crash. I only saw one. It the first thing I noticed when I was on the roof was dead silence. So much so that you can actually hear the faraway rumblings of the building. Meanwhile, there's tens and tens of thousands of people all across the skyline of western Queens, northern Brooklyn, and of course lower Manhattan and Midtown. 3 stories, 10 stories high. Buildings are all different sizes, shapes, but you could see it. It's lower Manhattan is a clear straight shot, and this lasted for like an hour. Even when the second tower collapsed, dead silence. It was the end of New York. It was the end of New York City as we know it. And not only New York City, it was the end of the world as we knew it, because what replaced that is what we have today. Warrantless wiretapping, complete automated 24-hour surveillance of ourselves and our next door neighbor into our daily lives. Everything's recorded. Everything is seen. Everything is heard. Mass propaganda. It's an inundation of self-debasement, defeatism, wordless entertainment. It just defeats you mentally. And we haven't been the same since. You can go in New York, go right in the middle of Times Square. And I have recently. And it's, of course, it's not going to be the same as it was in the 90s, but you could feel the difference. And I can't explain it in words because you got to be there and you got to be a New Yorker to experience it. You're out of town and you don't know. But as a New Yorker, it's like this whole the whole collapse of the World Trade Center really was the death knell of New York, and we didn't know at the time.
American people will not be intimidated, nor will we be defeated. We will find the people responsible for these cowardly acts, and justice will be done. Tommy.
Every single American lost something today. And every one of us at this time expresses our deepest sympathy to the victims of today's tragedies and their families. It is now our mission to begin the healing from this tragedy. From the moment that we learned of these attacks, the Department of Health and Human Services has begun readying teams and resources to be sent to New York City and the Washington area to meet any needs of state and local officials.
What's interesting about in the immediate aftermath of the attacks was something I never saw before and hasn't been seen since. The lowest crime rate in city history for those first 2 weeks. It was almost as if we saw a glimpse of what could be for every day, a togetherness. And it usually takes a very broad tragedy to get people to finally realize and look at their own mortality, but not only for themselves, but to other people. In other words, race, religion, politics didn't matter. We saw it to each other as human. Now, it was short-lived because in after that, we saw attacks on Sikhs, Indians, Burmese people at gas stations. I mean, when I used to go out to the clubs in the weekend, I would pass by some of these gas stations, and you would see some of these poor, Indians have to wearing American hats. There was one guy on a sign in Queens in Myrtle Avenue, which is where I lived nearby, and there was a sign that said, "Please don't attack us. We're born here." I remember one story where they burned a Sikh alive at a gas station. They burned him alive. He's not even Muslim. So, yeah, there was for those first 2 weeks, New York City saw an incredible dramatic spike downward in crime. But after that, after those 10 to 14 days were over, it was 9/11 didn't happen. But yeah, the psyche of the people enduring now afterwards, right? Weeks after, in the day, days after that, after those first 2 weeks in September, then we saw the real ugliness of people because now it was we need revenge. And this was all the momentum for Bush and his lackeys to say Iraq. They tried to get that in 93, but the towers didn't collapse because they didn't get enough money to build a bigger bomb. They tried to get that with the embassy bombings. Couldn't do it. The Millennium Plot. Couldn't do it. Pajinka Plot. Couldn't pull it off. 9/11. Right? So, and of course, people would have went to war with the Easter Island. It didn't matter. Bloodlust. But what did that prove? Approximately 1.5 million people died in the Iraq War. Afghanistan, 20 years to fight against Al Qaeda and Taliban. You know who took over the country? Al Qaeda and Taliban. It's almost as if Washington is basically keeping our enemies alive, even if it's just a slow heartbeat, but it's still a heartbeat, it's still alive. In the hopes that maybe later on down the road, when we fight another enemy, that enemy will regroup and become healthy and we can fight always. So there's always this repetition of fighting, war, conflict, which is what the Department of Defense wants. And of course, private military contractors want. And of course, military industrial complex wants. People would say, well, that's conspiracy thinking. Is it? Take from 2001 on forward. When have we not been in a war? The Trump administration, no, he didn't start new wars. He continued old ones. We've been at war for 24 straight years with at least somebody.
So far, we have sent 4 disaster medical teams to New York City, and 3 of these disaster medical teams to the Washington, Northern Virginia, Baltimore area. These medical teams each consist of about 35 physicians, nurses, and emergency medical technicians. They are all trained to deal with traumatic injuries and other emergency needs. We've also sent 4 disaster mortuary operational response teams to New York and 3 to the greater Washington area. We're also in the process of shipping a great deal of emergency medical supplies to New York City with the help of the Centers for Disease Control. In short, we're making the full force of the Department of Health and Human Services, both its resources and medical expertise available to the areas that need our assistance. We've also this afternoon activated the United States Public Health Service Commission Corps, which consists of approximately 6,000 health professionals. We also are giving backup assistance to the 500-bed ship Comfort from the United States Navy. Americans all over are calling up and asking what they can do. The best thing they can do is respond to this great call by volunteering to give blood. We need Americans to continue to answer that call. No matter where you live, please do your civic duty and assist us by donating blood. It is our primary job is to make sure Americans harmed by this tragedy get the help that they need. We will remain in constant contact with the governors, the mayors, public health officials, and other local officials to make sure that all their needs are being met. It is a sad day, but America and all of its citizens certainly share tonight in the grief that has been caused. And as the President and everybody in his administration have said, we, the government, will continue to operate and continue to provide the services to all Americans.
Well, of course, the government's going to continue to operate because the government was never at threat, right? I mean, the closest they got was the Pentagon, and basically a few people died there. But there was no attack on the Capitol. There was no attack on the Federal Reserve. There was no attack in, say, uh, the House of Representatives or the White House, right? But these were promising targets. These were targets that Al Qaeda wanted to hit, and I believe that they did. And I believe these targets would have been hit in the second wave of attacks, as outlined by the Pachinko plot. Um, but the fear now is that Al Qaeda today has a better idea, an idea that I once proposed when I was younger. I would play make believe with friends of mine. We had twisted minds, not ordinary kids. And we would think about, how we could kill people in large amounts. Just make believe. Not that we're not, you know, Dylan Klebold and Eric, whatever his name is, the Columbine shooters or nothing like that. But we would have devised dark plans about, how do you attack large groups of people. And one of them was that you would have AK-47s hidden in bags, duffel bags, and then go right in the middle of Times Square on a summer afternoon and just open fire. That alone would probably kill a lot more people than, say, of what happened in the Pentagon at Shanksville. And it would paralyze the city forever because no one will be in populated areas. And of course, on top of that, you'll have extra additional security, which is, already that's defeatism in itself because we had the security apparatus in place to stop 9/11 and it didn't stop it. And now we add more security on it. In fact, we put so much more security on it that we now put security on you to keep you safe. Oh, and by the way, we'll have to restrict your civil liberties, your freedoms, in order to ensure that you stay safe. I mean, that's what Dan Rather said live on air. Oh, was it Tom Brokaw? One of them said that we have to start thinking about relinquishing civil liberties. Can't believe. So, yes, we had the security apparatus to stop 9/11, and we didn't. So we opened up the 9/11 Commission. We had the Joint House Inquiry formulated. And what did they come up with? Shame on you, FBI. Shame on you, CIA, NSA. Yeah, okay. Didn't even investigate the NSA. The one agency who were listening to bin Laden's satellite phones, who were listening to the Al Qaeda communications hub in Yemen. Maybe they were talking about the plans or not. I don't know. Maybe they're talking about other operations. Is that the reason why the NSA wasn't investigated or given, a chance to relay what information they got? Remember, the 9/11 Commission and Joint House Secretary barely asked the NSA anything. And Director Hayden was attended. Afterwards, he became the director of the CIA. Why? Well, maybe not. There he is.
One of the most cherished freedoms is the freedom of movement, the ability to move freely and safely. But today that freedom was attacked. But we will restore that freedom throughout the national transportation system as soon as possible. And we will restore the highest possible degree of service. These terrorist acts are designed to steal the confidence of Americans. We will restore that confidence. We have already taken some first steps as a precaution. I have ordered the FAA to ground all commercial air traffic until at least tomorrow afternoon. After the attack, some of our aircraft were diverted to Canada. And so we owe our Canadian neighbors a debt of gratitude for helping us as we redirected over.
Well, let me tell you about the story. Forgive me because I vaguely remember it. There was a plane that was heading, I think, into the United States from Canada and had to be, stopped. It was grounded. And there's a story about a guy. He was with like two others. They were celebrating while the attacks were happening. Now, DJ Thermodetonator, if you're watching this video, you know what I'm talking about because I learned it from you. And I looked up the story, and it's true. They actually did. I think they arrested the guy who detained him, and they had to let him go because they found nothing. But it's interesting. And there's this whole conspiracy about you know uh, the border between the United States and Canada being used for what we theorize is the second wave of attackers. And that's the reason why Muhammad Atta went out of his way to Portland. I mean, why else? It had to be something important that Atta and Alamari were attending because they were going to a state that basically was not involved with the attack. So that means they would have a connecting flight. And they just almost missed their flight by mere minutes. So it's not like their travel was trivial. This was something very important, and the FBI investigated it and didn't write anything down in the 9/11, in their report, and the 9/11 Commission barely gave it a footnote. And it's really interesting because nobody knows what they were there for.
120 flights and their passengers to airports in Canada. As of 6 p.m., Amtrak resumed its passenger rail service. Major railroads have taken steps to protect their assets as well. The United States Coast Guard is taking all necessary actions to control the movements of all vessels in navigable waters of the United States. Coast Guard helicopters have been assisting with medical and national security tasks. We are currently looking at a wide variety of additional security measures to increase traveler security. Travelers will indeed see increased security measures at our airports, train stations, and other key sites. There will be higher levels of surveillance, more stringent searches. Airport curbside luggage check-in will no longer be allowed. There will be more security officers and random identification checks.
Why didn't we have this when, say, the Pachinko plot report was given to, the administration of the FAA, for example? According to then Director Louis Freeh of the FBI, he got a copy of the report from the Philippines National Police in regards to a threat to U.S. Airlines. This is where the idea of 9/11 came from. And if you look at my Pachinko Intelligence Report series, I go into detail about, reading these reports, and you can see right there, this is 1996, all right? This is 5 years prior to 9/11, that there was this threat to airliners, that Arab fundamentalist groups wanted to use airliners as a means of a weapon. And that, I never could basically understand why the FAA didn't put stricter security measures in 96. Why INS, the Immigration Naturalization Service, why didn't they have this stricter admissions for people in the Middle East or Southeast Asia or Europe, for that matter? Why weren't they there? Because the flags were already there in 96, 97. So all what Norman Mineta is saying here, this could have been applied 5 years prior to the attacks. And it wasn't. But now the attacks happened, now we got to put these security measures in place. It's almost like, you live on a busy street, car accidents happen, and then you have this board meeting with the mayor or something, local law enforcement, or health, safety, and you air your grievances as a dutiful neighbor and say, we need a traffic light, or somebody's going to get killed. And they'll give you the old hee-haw, yeah, we'll think about it. Meanwhile, it's about spending money. It's about not being lazy. So one day, that person on the street gets killed. The next day, a light goes up. That's 9/11 here in a nutshell.
Travelers may experience some inconveniences, but we ask for your patience. But we must do whatever it takes with safety as our highest priority. The Department of Transportation is working closely with the White House and appropriate federal agencies to mount a coordinated nationwide recovery effort. Each American must know that we will restore our national transportation system to a safe and efficient status as quickly as possible. Our system has been severely burdened by the stress of these horrendous attacks, but we will recover. In a democracy, there is always a balance between freedom and security. Our transportation systems, reflecting the values of our society, have always operated in an open and accessible manner, and they will again. Please be assured that we are activating all of our resources on an emergency basis, and services will be restored as soon as possible.
Good evening. I activated this afternoon 8 urban search and rescue task forces from all over the United States and an incident support team to arrive in New York. They are on their way as we speak. I've spoken with Governor Pataki, Governor Gilmore, Mayor Giuliani. They are handling this about as well as anyone could handle it. These teams we've deployed are especially trained teams from all across the country, comprised of engineers and other technical individuals with dogs that are trained to handle incidents such as this. We at FEMA have also put a team on the ground, an advanced element team. They will be at the scene of the disaster probably as we speak. The Army Corps of Engineers are already on the ground getting ready to handle debris removal. This afternoon, as you know, the President did declare New York City a disaster. I have named Ted Mineta the Federal Coordinating Officer. He will be my personal representative on the ground during the duration of this incident. In Washington, as the Secretary said, we have 3 mortuary teams on site, 3 medical teams, 4 urban search and rescue teams. I believe this afternoon we shared with members of the media the names of those specific teams.
You know, what's interesting is that a lot of these search and rescue operations basically didn't turn up many bodies, because in New York, especially, because the bodies were crushed into molecules with all the weight of the debris, with people inside, say, you know, the 50th, 60th floors of the World Trade Centers. You know, just imagine, you know, millions of pounds of debris crushing on top of you at a speed of less than half a second. And it's something that the 9/11 Truth Movement, you know, really couldn't comprehend, because it's, you know, they think it's complex, and these people are very, you know, they're very apt, they're susceptible to believing, you know, ridiculous theories, because they can't accept the simple fact that bodies can disappear. You know, we're 90% liquid. And, you know, if a plane crashes into a building at 450 miles an hour, and you are in the back of the plane, you suddenly become the front of the plane in less than half a second. What do you think is going to exist? Nothing, almost. It's rather miraculous that they got all the human remains of every single passenger. Now it could have been small pieces of remains, or, you know, sizable pieces of remains. They couldn't find, I think, 3 passengers on board Flight 77 at the Pentagon. The meticulous nature of, say, Fairfax County, Montgomery County, search and rescue operations, people from FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or people from, you know, local and state EMS, and even the fire departments or the police departments that were involved with search and rescue operations. And then this would go to the pathologists, people that set up temporary morgues on site, or they went to in Washington for Pennsylvania and Washington attacks. They went to Dover Air Force Base, where Dover Mortuary took over the process of identifying the bodies through the remains and DNA samples given by families and friends. In New York, it was much more. This was the one thing that really was pronounced. Was that the pathologists in New York were um, much more thorough, and they had a lot to work with in regards to, say, in contrast to the Pentagon in Shanksville. New York had, basically almost nothing, and they were like investigating the bodies of, how many was it, 2,600 something people. That's, a lot of people that they're going to try and find. And it took them years, literally years, to identify just a couple of people. And they still didn't identify the majority of them. So the meticulous work of the New York pathologists, are just remarkable.
We'll be deploying individuals as needed. I'll be in constant contact with those governors. Additional search and rescue if needed. We're identifying additional needs that state and local governments are requiring. As a result of the President's disaster declaration, tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, individuals who have been harmed may call our helpline. Let me give you that number, 1-800-462-9029.
That's basically it, because he calls, he talks about what tip lines you can use and this and that. But again, these breakdown videos, these probably are my favorites to do any videos. And I love doing everything I do, but these are my favorites because I can basically try and fill in the blanks for you, for those who are not vested into this specific point in human history. And I try to do the best I can in trying to fill in those blanks, but I don't have all the answers either. And I'm learning along the way too. So I consider myself a student, not an expert in this field. So these breakdown videos are going to always entail the federal investigation into the attacks of September 11, 2001. And I haven't done these in so long because so much has happened to me in the last month in my personal life. And not to drone on that, it was really, it took a wear and tear on me. But, I'm starting to rebound now, and basically things are looking up, really looking up fast. So this is great. And I could do more of these videos. I try to publish every day a video, but I used to do 3 videos a day at one point, on top of publishing, other videos as well. But yeah, okay. Merry Christmas to each and every one of you. And I'm still rebuilding my channel. And for those who have not subscribed, please do so. Please subscribe. And I'm also, I lost the WordPress, but I still have Substack. So I'm going to be uploading there too. If you want to drop a donation, go right ahead. But otherwise, it's free. And, I'll never ask for money for my services. My services are always going to be free. And I do it because I want to empower people. And it's the only way we're going to, get justice for the people involved with these attacks. All right, guys. Like I said, Merry Christmas to each and every one of you. Have a lovely evening. Spend it with family and friends because they're the ones that matter. And see you in the next video.